There are many championships in wrestling that lay claim to being the most prestigious around. We could argue all day about the merits of various world titles, but the one that speaks to fans new and old, adults and children alike, must surely be the WWE Championship. You could even say it's the most universal of championships, except it's not that one, it's the other one. It's been through many iconic designs, from the winged eagle to the big globe, Steve Austin's smoking skull to John Cena's glittery spinning thing. It's also been through many ups and downs, rising and falling in stature just like the wrestling industry itself. 50 men have held the WWE Championship since its inception in 1963, and because 50 is a lovely round number, we've decided to rank all of them from worst to best. This is definitely going to cause debate, because of course it is. In fact, there was almost an office brawl when we were sorting out the rankings. But the important thing is that we've done it in the spirit of fun, and wrestling is supposed to be fun, so please don't get too angry if you think that we haven't given Stan Stasiak his due. Just before we begin, it's important to briefly mention Antonio Inoki. The New Japan founder won the title in 1979, and the rematch 6 days later went to a no contest. Sportingly, or perhaps because WWE didn't want a very tough man holding their belt hostage in Japan, he refused his reign, and it's not part of the title's official lineage. Here's to you, Inoki, or as we're now going to nickname you, Episode 1, the Phantom Champion. So, without any further ado, I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and this is every single WWE champion ranked from worst to best. Join us! Number 50, Rey Mysterio. Rey, we're really sorry. Yes, despite being one of the most innovative, respected wrestlers of all time, Rey Mysterio wins our wooden spoon. The worst part is, it wasn't even his fault. Mysterio's solitary reign lasted less than the duration of one episode of Raw, and we know that Raw can often feel like a lifetime, but it's not actually that long in the grand scheme of things. When CM Punk scampered off into the Chicago sunset with WWE's biggest prize, a tournament was held on Raw to crown a new champion. Despite 2 reigns with the World Heavyweight title, Rey had never actually held the WWE Championship in his illustrious career. That all changed in the tournament final when he defeated The Miz, and children everywhere rejoiced. Then, a totally fresh John Cena was handed a title shot for later that same night, and crushed Rey's dreams in pretty straightforward fashion, and children everywhere continued to rejoice. Because if there's literally one thing children love more than Rey Mysterio, it's Big Match John. Number 49, Vince McMahon. Heartwarming 1983 rom-com Scarface features the famous line, "Don't get high on your own supply." The WWE equivalent of that happened in 1999 when Mr. McMahon won his company's own championship on an episode of SmackDown. And while things didn't go as badly for him as they did Tony Montana, it was still a low point in the lineage of the title. Despite taking part in some strangely entertaining matches over the years, and despite fathering the best wrestler in the world, it's still weird to see the boss's name in history alongside so many all-time greats. There are 2 saving graces that prevent Vince's reign from finishing dead last here. Number 1, he didn't outclass anybody to win the title. Steve Austin was raising a little hell, as Steve Austin does, and decided it would be funny to crash Vince's title match and help him beat Triple H. In fairness, it was a little bit funny. Number 2, his reign only lasted until the following Monday, as he vacated the belt on Raw. He then cut an emotional promo where he said he was suffering from a knee injury and he'd lost his smile somewhere along the way. No, wait, that was someone else. We'll get to that later. Number 48, Andre the Giant. As with Rey, it feels so wrong putting a legendary name so far down on this list. Sadly, also like Rey, Andre's one title reign lasted less than a day. In February 1988, Andre avenged his loss at WrestleMania 3 by pinning Hogan for the WWF Championship. He then immediately tried to sell the title to Ted DiBiase, only for the transaction to be overruled by President Jack Tunney. As well as disrespecting the belt by trying to offload it for some of that sweet dollar, Andre's win was also a very cheap one. Despite being literally a giant who could crush all of our skulls in his massive wheelbarrow hands, you'd better believe that Andre wasn't about to beat the Hulkster clean. It's far more likely that Hogan would demand a screwy finish, or an evil twin referee, or just kick out at 2 anyway. Or maybe all 3 of those things, which is legitimately what happened. Number 47, Kane. In 2010, at the age of 43, Kane finally got a hold of the World Heavyweight Championship. The big gold one, not the one this video's about. It was really nice to see, a loyal veteran rewarded by the company for so many years of hard work. It was also a massive relief, because his reign with the other world title was very embarrassing indeed. Kane held the WWF Championship just once, for one day, back in 1998. He wrestled Stone Cold at King of the Ring, with the stipulation in place that if he did not win the title, he would set himself on fire. He announced it by speaking into his electronic voice box, and it was really sinister and cool, but also, let's be honest now, a very ridiculous stipulation. So ridiculous, in fact, that everybody said, wait a minute, we can't actually have one of our wrestlers set himself on fire, he actually has to win now, he has to win the title. Bollocks. So, to avoid hurting himself very badly, Kane won the title from Austin before losing it back to him the very next night on Raw, and that's the story of Kane's one-day title reign. Number 46, Stan Stasiak. Back in the dirty olden days, wrestling used to rely a lot on transitional champions. To switch the title from one popular babyface to another, a heel would sneak a cheap win over the champ before losing it to the new guy a few weeks later. We still see transitional champions these days, but the complexities of modern storylines often help to make it less obvious. Unless your name is Nicholas. One of the WWE title's earliest transitional champions was Stan Stasiak, a Canadian heel and the father of Shawn Stasiak. You might remember Shawn from his time as WCW Tag Champion, or the time he ran straight into Kurt Angle's milk truck. Stan held the WWF title, as it was then known, for 9 days in 1973. He pinned Pedro Morales after taking a belly-to-back suplex, only to lift his shoulder off the canvas at the last second. Footage of this title change is very hard to find, so here's a photo of Stan Stasiak looking like a massive heel. Look at him, what a dastardly villain. One of his signature moves was the heart punch. He genuinely punched people in the heart. Despite being an underwhelming reign, we think that this is actually a really nice story. Apparently, Stasiak found out that he was booked to win in the locker room the day of the match and had never expected to be crowned champion. That's just lovely. Number 45, Jinder Mahal. Well, this one's fresh in the memory. Despite trying to erase it from our minds and sticking the belt on AJ Styles and making him do lots of good wrestling, WWE can't wipe Jinder's title reign from history. His unlikely rise from the lower mid-card to WWE Champion is a true testament to Jinder's hard work and dedication, but with that said, there's no denying the confusion and disappointment that greeted his reign. In case you'd forgotten, Jinder won the belt at Backlash 2017, beating Randy Orton after a distraction from the Singh brothers. This can't possibly get any worse, we all said, before the great Khali returned to help him win a Punjabi prison match at Battleground. After a long and interesting summer, Mahal finally dropped the belt to AJ Styles in November. This remains the only time a WWE Championship has officially changed hands outside of North America, with the show taking place in Manchester, England. Another fun fact, Jinder remains the only member of the three-man band with a WWE title reign at the time of recording. We know it's only a matter of time until that changes though. We've got faith, we know you can do it. You've got this, Heath. Number 44, Sergeant Slaughter. So remember when we were talking about how transitional champions have always existed, but the fans can often be distracted by storylines? Let's take a look at maybe the most distracting storyline in the history of the championship. Taking inspiration from the 1990 invasion of Kuwait by Iraq, WWE decided to turn Sergeant Slaughter heel by making him an Iraqi sympathizer. We should probably mention that Slaughter was uncomfortable with the gimmick and that it might have been a little bit politically insensitive. Slaughter won the title from the Ultimate Warrior at the '91 Royal Rumble before losing to Hogan a few months later at WrestleMania. Because if you think an Iraqi sympathizer was going to beat Hulk goddamn Hogan, you've never watched any wrestling ever. How did you find this video? How did you make it this far? Number 43, Bray Wyatt. I feel quite bad for Bray Wyatt because at the start of his reign, everybody was genuinely excited. Despite having one of the most original and entertaining gimmicks on the roster, Wyatt has often struggled in terms of actual success. Yes, he's a mystical cult leader from the swamp, but put him in a match with Cena or The Undertaker and watch him get genuinely battered. It was therefore a big relief to see Bray win the WWE Championship, last pinning AJ Styles to win the 2017 Elimination Chamber. It seemed like a new dawn for the Eater of Worlds. Then, things quickly went wrong. Bray had made a new friend in the form of Randy Orton, and despite Orton being one of the least trustworthy WWE superstars in history, he really let his guard down. Then, Orton set fire to his house and took his title at WrestleMania, and we weren't even supposed to feel sorry for Bray, we were supposed to laugh at him. Number 42, Rob Van Dam. It's fair to say that RVD had one of the most electrifying title wins in the history of the WWE title, and that's the only thing saving him from a much lower place on this list. Let's examine why. When Van Dam beat John Cena at One Night Stand 2006, it felt like the stars had aligned. This was an ECW legend defeating the company's golden boy for the WWE Championship in front of a rabid crowd in the Hammerstein Ballroom. The world seemed to be RVD's oyster, and he even became a double world champion as Paul Heyman awarded him the ECW title out of sheer gratitude. He defeated Edge at Vengeance, and then things went quickly south. A week after Vengeance, RVD and Sabu were arrested for possession of drugs, having been pulled over for speeding. Van Dam was quickly booked to drop both his WWE and ECW titles before being suspended for 30 days. He'd never be given another run at the top, making his short reign one of the title's biggest cases of unrealized potential. Number 41, Yokozuna. Coming in an era where stars such as Mr. Perfect, Razor Ramon, and Lex Luger never held the WWF Championship, Yokozuna's 280 days with the gold seems pretty impressive. But when you look at the booking behind his two title reigns, you start to realize that he didn't enjoy the best of times as champ. Yokozuna's first reign was a joke, and one of the most infamous moments in WrestleMania history. Having beaten Bret Hart in the main event of WrestleMania 9, he immediately accepted a challenge from Hulk Hogan and lost in 22 seconds. In his second reign, it never felt as though the company wanted to book this gigantic powerhouse as, well, a gigantic powerhouse. He won the belt back from Hogan at King of the Ring 93, but as we've learned by now, you don't beat Hogan for the title clean. This time, the Hulkster was undone by Harvey Whippleman disguised as a Japanese photographer who blew up his camera in Hogan's face. Obviously, how did he not see that coming? Hogan left the WWF shortly after, and this could have been remembered as the title change that ended Hulkamania. Instead, Yokozuna went on to be body slammed by Lex Luger on the USS Intrepid, lose by countout at SummerSlam, lose the main event of Survivor Series, and lose the title at WrestleMania. He did pick up a win over Undertaker at one stage, but he was helped by about 12 other heels. That's not an exaggeration, look at them all! Number 40, Diesel. Diesel suffered from the opposite problem to Yokozuna. While the big sumo often looked too weak, Diesel was booked too strong. Big Sexual Kevin had only one run with the belt, but it lasted almost a year. Bob Backlund had just shockingly defeated Bret Hart for the title, so you'd like to think that Diesel would have a tough time winning it from him. This would keep Bret looking strong, and so on. Nope! Instead, Diesel squashed Backlund 3 days later, at a house show in 8 seconds. Nash was booked like Roman Reigns before Roman Reigns was even in his teens. Always shown to be the biggest, toughest, coolest guy in the company. Too sweet, bros. His title defenses weren't great either, from an underwhelming Mania match against HBK, to a big clunky feud with Sid, to the worst main event in SummerSlam history. The best match of the reign was also his final one, as Diesel lost to Bret at Survivor Series. It's a good reminder that although Nash enjoyed many entertaining moments in WWE, almost none of them came with the championship. He's still got lovely hair though. Number 39, JBL. When bad WWE Championship reigns are discussed, a name often thrown around is John Bradshaw Layfield. He's not ranked very highly on our list, but we've decided to put him ahead of Diesel for one key reason. At least we were supposed to hate him. 2004 was a very confusing time, particularly on SmackDown, where the taller one from the Acolytes decided to cut his hair, buy a suit, and act like a Wall Street tycoon. It was a strange change of gimmick, but a harmless one at first. Then he won the WWE Championship. There were two problems here. Number one, for the vast majority of his career, JBL's entire persona had been tough man in a tag team, but suddenly we were expected to buy him as a top heel on SmackDown. It was like if Reverend Devon had won the Royal Rumble. Number 2, his reign just wasn't fun. I get it, sometimes heels win by luck or cheating, and that's part of wrestling, but at least make it entertaining. JBL beat The Undertaker by DQ, won the rematch thanks to Heidenreich, beat Booker T with a belt shot, won a fatal 4-way thanks to Heidenreich again, and won a barbed wire cage match by accident. Look, we're not saying Paul Heyman was right when he suggested that JBL only won the title because Triple H didn't want to be on SmackDown, but let's move on. Number 38, Alberto Del Rio. From the moment he debuted, Del Rio seemed destined for a long heelish reign with the WWE Championship. He burst onto the scene, winning the 2011 Royal Rumble and Money in the Bank ladder match with ease. The only problem, he picked the worst possible time to go for the gold. As we all know, the latter half of 2011 was entirely about two people, John Cena and CM Punk. Their feud had captured the fans' imagination in historic fashion, but for some reason, WWE decided to keep complicating things. Oh, here's Kevin Nash, he's back to spoil the party. Here's John Laurinaitis sending a text. Here's Del Rio cashing in at SummerSlam when nobody wants him to. Alberto lost the title to Cena a month later, won it back, then lost it to Punk at Survivor Series. Neither of his reigns were bad per se, just poorly timed. Number 37, Sheamus. Sheamus has held the WWE Championship 3 times. That's more times than the likes of Randy Savage, Ric Flair, CM Punk, Chris Jericho, and Batista. If that sounds weird, it's because it is weird. Sheamus has had a pretty weird career, specifically when it comes to being WWE Champion. I think the problem is that his title wins have come across as lucky rather than deserving. And no, that's not a stereotype. I'm not saying Sheamus is lucky because he's Irish, but it's clearly true though, come on. He beat Cena at TLC 2009 in a tables match, and although it's never been confirmed, it really looks as though he was supposed to go through that table. But he missed it and became champion. His second reign came because the Nexus just happened to interfere at the right time, and his third reign came because Seth Rollins got injured at a house show. Oh, where was this house show, by the way? In Dublin, Ireland. Number 36, The Miz. We all love The Miz these days, but it hasn't always been that way. Back in 2010, there was a far more mixed reaction to him winning the WWE Championship, cashing in on Randy Orton the night after Survivor Series. He didn't get much help from creative either. Rarely have WWE champions been portrayed as weak to this degree, but despite the booking, Miz really tried to milk his title reign for all it was worth. He would have lost the title to Jerry Lawler if it wasn't for Michael Cole, and he was made a footnote of his own WrestleMania main event by The Rock. But despite all that, Miz was somehow an entertaining champion, if not a credible one. Few one-time champs deserve another reign as much as The Miz, but at the time of recording, that hasn't happened yet. Hopefully we see it in the near future. Number 35, Big Show. Big Show is big, clearly. Don't say you never learn anything from these videos. However, the main problem with his 2 WWE title reigns is the fact that despite being the Big Show, he was never the biggest show, right? That sounded a lot more clever in my head. Basically, what I mean is, Big Show's 2 reigns came when he was surrounded by a roster of all-time greats, from the likes of Steve Austin to Brock Lesnar to Kurt Angle and so on. His first stint as champ came off the back of a nice babyface win at Survivor Series 99, filling in for Stone Cold, who had just been ran down by Rikishi, but it actually turned out to be Triple H, but it was still Rikishi really. He also won the belt in 2002, screwing Brock Lesnar with the help of Paul Heyman. They were a pair of short, unremarkable reigns to be honest, but at least they served a narrative purpose both times. Number 34, Psycho Sid. Despite having the look and size of an old-school monster champion, Sid never felt right with the title. Maybe that's because, like Big Show, he was surrounded by some of the greatest of all time. Why should we be happy that Sid's the champ when Bret, Shawn, Austin, and The Undertaker are all floating around in non-title limbo? Unlike the Big Show though, Sid's first reign at least came with a decent feud. He won the belt from HBK at Survivor Series 96, smashing manager Jose Lothario with a camera in the process. He lost it back to Shawn at the Rumble, this time getting smashed with a camera himself. Sometimes wrestling storylines are really simple. His second reign came when Austin interfered to screw arch-rival Bret out of the title. Sid wasn't really the main focus of this story, but did become the first man to win the belt on Raw, so he'll always have that at least. Number 33, Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy is one of WWE's most enduringly popular superstars because he's handsome and he jumps off high things. So despite never being a world champion for much of his WWE career, people absolutely lost their minds when he was. Jeff's held the World Heavyweight Championship twice, but the WWE title only once. That reign began at Armageddon 2008, where he won a triple threat match involving Triple H and Edge. What a hairy match, just so much hair everywhere. everywhere. His reign only lasted 42 days, but it's worth again pointing out just how well received Jeff was as a champion. People reacted like he was the chosen one, the one who would finally bring balance to the force. Instead, sadly, Jeff was screwed out of the title at the Royal Rumble, but it was at least due to a shocking swerve. Older brother Matt interfered in his title match against Edge, looking to destroy the man who had genuinely stolen his girlfriend. Instead, he smashed his own brother with a steel chair, suggesting that maybe he doesn't have his priorities right. Number 32, Buddy Rogers. Here we go, we had to mention him at some point, the first ever champion in the title's history, the original Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers. Rogers was a true great of his era, as the pro wrestling business started to become televised. He had charisma, a great look, an impressive physique, and seemed every inch a star. Despite all of that, Buddy's reign only lasted 22 days. But why? After Rogers was booked to drop the NWA title to Lou Thez, a disgruntled Vince McMahon Sr. pulled out of the old alliance, forming the WWF in 1963. Rogers was declared the first champion and would have been a top draw, but he suffered a mild heart attack at the worst possible time. With his endurance greatly hindered, Rogers was forced to drop the championship to Bruno Sammartino in under a minute. Despite the shortness of his reign, Rogers' importance as the first champion must be recognised. We've deducted points, however, for the fact that he won the title in a fictional tournament in Brazil. Alright mate, we all exaggerate when we get back from holiday. Number 31, Batista. Like Buddy Rogers, Batista should have been a bigger deal with this title around his waist, only for an ill-timed injury to mess things up. The Animal defeated Randy Orton in a cage match at Extreme Rules 2009, but was forced to vacate the title the next night on Raw due to a bicep tear. Upon returning from injury, moving to SmackDown, and turning heel on Rey Mysterio, Batista helped Vince McMahon in his feud with Bret Hart. If the thought of Drax the Destroyer beating up a man in his 50s sounds unfair, he was rewarded with an equally unfair title shot. After John Cena had survived a grueling Elimination Chamber match, Batista strode out and beat him for the title in seconds. He lost it back to Cena a few weeks later at WrestleMania, but it still made for a pretty memorable reign. Ultimately though, despite being one of the biggest wrestlers of the 21st century, Batista's time with the WWE Championship doesn't particularly stand out. He'll probably be more remembered for his 4 World Heavyweight title reigns, or perhaps his magnificent Hollywood career. I'm sure he's devastated. Number 30, Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose's 2016 title reign started in very exciting fashion, but fizzled out quickly after that. Nobody's sure of the exact reason, but we at Cultaholic are almost certain that it's the work of the best wrestler in the world, Shane McMahon. Allow me to explain. Ambrose had all the momentum in the world after the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. He just won and cashed in the briefcase on the same night, defeating Seth Rollins, avenging the breakup of the Shield, and winning the WWE Championship for the first time. Everything was going great and the fans were happy. Then Shane McMahon became commissioner of SmackDown and drafted Ambrose first, turning the upcoming Shield triple threat match into a game of which brand is going to get the title. Despite winning that match, Ambrose's victory was turned into Shane's victory and things went downhill from there. He would eventually lose the title to AJ Styles at Backlash when the Phenomenal One kicked him right in the balls. After working for so long to become the WWE Champion, that must have been a real kick in... no, it's too easy. Number 29, Ivan Koloff. Ivan Koloff was another example of the old school transitional champion. So why have we ranked him so much higher than Stan Stasiak? Quite simply, Koloff was responsible for one of the most infamous title changes in all of wrestling history. He defeated the legendary Bruno Sammartino with a knee drop from the top rope, rendering the Madison Square Garden crowd utterly silent. It was like that bit in Game of Thrones where all the babyfaces got stabbed even though there was still about 5 seasons left. That's some prime Triple H NXT booking. But back to Koloff though, who etched his name in WWE history despite only holding the title for 3 weeks. In knocking off Sammartino, he became only the 3rd WWF champion, but wasn't even presented the belt after the match because everyone was worried there would be a riot. That's proper heel heat. Number 28, the Iron Sheik. These days, the Iron Sheik is best known as your dad, plus social media times a billion. But he was also one of the most beloved heels of the Golden Era. Despite his iconic status, he only held the WWF Championship once, but what a crucial reign that turned out to be. When Vince Jr. took over from Vince Sr. in the early 80s, he knew who he wanted the new face of the company to be. In order to usher in a new age, he needed to get the belt off Bob Backlund and onto the next big thing, Uncle Elmer. If he could do that, Elmer Mania would be born. He is a real Elmerican. Fight for the rights of Elmer, man. No, it was actually Hulk Hogan. But rumor has it that Backlund refused to drop the title to Hogan, saying he'd only lose to somebody with amateur wrestling credentials like his own. That's where the Iron Sheik came in. He defeated Backlund in December 1983, and despite only holding the belt for a month, wrestled the likes of Tito Santana, Pat Patterson, and Chief Jay Strongbow. Eventually, he came up against the Hulkster in Madison Square Garden, where Hogan famously powered out of the camel clutch, hit an immortal leg drop, and sparked a preposterous new era of wrestling. Good job, Sheiky. Number 27, Chris Jericho. Y2J is pretty synonymous with title success, having held the big gold belt 5 times, the IC title 9 times, and the tag titles 5 times. But despite being one of the most intelligent and entertaining wrestlers of all time, Jericho only enjoyed one WWF Championship reign. Admittedly, it was an important one, but everything culminated in one of the most disappointing WrestleMania feuds ever. Let's start at the beginning, Vengeance 2001, where Jericho shockingly defeated The Rock and Steve Austin in one night to unify the WCW and WWF titles. As the first ever undisputed champion, you'd think a rocket would have been strapped to Y2J's back. Instead, he ran headfirst into the game. Jericho feuded with Triple H in the build to WrestleMania 18, and in doing so was humiliated and mocked on an almost weekly basis. He aligned with old enemy Stephanie McMahon, and the rivalry became as much about her as it did the undisputed goddamn champion. Triple H's dog Lucy even got involved in the storyline, which, as a reminder, was leading up to the main event of WrestleMania. Jericho lost the eventual match, but I'm not sure I even needed to tell you that. Number 26, Mankind. After Austin beat Michaels at WrestleMania and the Attitude Era really picked up steam, everything started to feel like one of those levels from Dynasty Warriors. The product went full throttle week in, week out, with waves and waves of people just smashing into each other all the time. Nobody was safe, and that included the WWF champion. No one could keep a hold of the title for long in the late 90s, especially in the case of Mick Foley, who reigned for a combined total of 36 days. That's barely a month, Mick. You had 3 reigns. So why does Mankind find himself at number 26? Well, his brief time winning and losing the title includes some of the most memorable moments of the Monday Night Wars. News of his pre-tape title win caused Tony Schiavone, courtesy of Eric Bischoff, to sarcastically say, "That'll put butts in seats," live on Nitro. And then 600,000 people switched over to Raw to watch it happen. Even though Mankind didn't do much apart from allow Austin to drag his exhausted body on top of The Rock, it was still an iconic piece of wrestling history. Foley lost the belt soon after, dropping it back to The Rock in a brutal I Quit match. That's the one with all the chair shots. He then won it back in an empty arena match during the halftime of the Super Bowl, which somehow didn't contain as many chair shots despite it taking place in an arena full of empty chairs. He was also once a transitional champion, winning the belt at SummerSlam 99 before losing it the next night on Raw, amid rumors that Stone Cold wouldn't job to Triple H. Who does the rattlesnake think he is? Bob Backlund? We'll explain later. Number 25, The Ultimate Warrior. What he lacked in pure wrestling ability, The Ultimate Warrior more than made up for in size and enthusiasm. He was about as 80s as an 80s wrestler could get, complete with face paint, tassels, and getting very, very excited a lot of the time. He connected so well with fans that by the time 1990 rolled around, he didn't just win the WWF Championship, he did so by beating Hulk Hogan clean. Okay, yes, Hogan kicked out on the stroke of 3, and yes, he massively stole Warrior's limelight afterwards, but there's no getting away from the immense nature of this victory. Unfortunately, the rest of Warrior's reign wasn't quite as explosive as the beginning, but he held onto the title for almost 300 days. Taking all that into account, it plonks Warrior slap bang in the middle of our ranking. He is the ultimate average WWE champion. Hooray! Interlude time. To celebrate reaching halfway, we're going to have a quick math lesson. If the average WWE champion was an actual person, he'd have 3 reigns for a combined total of 399 days. He'd have a 76% chance of being an American, a 10% chance of being from Texas, and a 2% chance of being in the Bullet Club. He would probably have brown hair. Thanks for listening. Number 24, Roman Reigns. WWE attracted a lot of criticism for having Roman Reigns win and win and win and win and win all the time, so you might be surprised to know that he's only held the WWE Championship for 118 days. His first reign lasted seconds when Sheamus cashed in at Survivor Series to leave him lying in all that confetti. He'd beat Sheamus a short while later, punching the face off of Vince McMahon in the process, but his second stint with the belt didn't last especially long either. That's because Triple H came back to win the Royal Rumble like a big angry angry dad, but again Roman got revenge, this time at WrestleMania 32. Finally, Seth Rollins returned to deal the big dog a shocking loss at Money in the Bank, completing a trio of pretty short reigns. Still, crowd reaction aside, they were packed with eventful moments, and he even managed to squeeze an excellent feud with AJ Styles in there too. Number 23, Eddie Guerrero. We've already looked at a few WWE champions who only held the belt briefly, but were immensely popular for the duration of their time at the top. Along with the likes of Jeff Hardy and Mankind, we need to talk about maybe the perfect example, Eddie Guerrero. Eddie only had one reign, but it's a period looked back on with great fondness by so many wrestling fans. It came at the absolute peak of his popularity. He won the title from Brock Lesnar at No Way Out 2004, a great match and a monumental upset, although the interference of Goldberg might have been a tiny factor. Eddie defended the title in a collection of very memorable matches, including a WrestleMania showcase against Kurt Angle, where he slipped out of his boot to escape the ankle lock. There was also that absolute bloodbath against JBL, which we're not going to dwell on for too long because we don't want YouTube to think we're showing images from some kind of actual atrocity. It was a molten hot run, but sadly a very brief one too. Given Eddie's status as one of the greatest of all time, at least we can say he held it once. Number 22, Seth Rollins. When the Shield burst onto the scene, everyone had different opinions on who the breakout star would be. Generally speaking though, the internet thought it would be Dean Ambrose, while WWE thought it would be Roman Reigns. Interestingly, Seth Rollins thought it would be Seth Rollins, and that panned out quite nicely for him. Seth's cash-in at WrestleMania 31 remains one of the most dramatic endings to any WrestleMania ever. I'm even tempted to put it ahead of the time Papa Shango missed his cue and ran out after the match was already over. After such an explosive start, the rest of Rollins' reigns was characterized by a lot of ups and downs. He became a double title holder by beating US champion Cena, but had to do so with the help of Jon Stewart, a normal-sized person off the telly. He put on 2 great matches consecutively, losing to Cena and beating Sting in the same night, but accidentally injured Sting in the process. Things came to a sudden end when Rollins injured his knee at a house show in Dublin, which definitely didn't have anything to do with Sheamus. His second reign lasted seconds, but it was at least part of a historic night in which all 3 members of the Shield held the title, aka the wettest night in WWE history. Because of their hair, I mean. Behave. Number 21, Daniel Bryan. At the time of recording, Daniel Bryan is the current WWE Champion, which has made him quite tricky to rank. For all we know, he could drop it to The Miz tomorrow. He could lose it to Curt Hawkins after slipping on a banana peel. Of course, the current champ is a dirty, dirty heel after kicking AJ Styles' penis off en route to victory. His most notable runs, however, have been as the ultimate babyface. Prior to his current reign, Bryan enjoyed euphoric heights with the WWE Championship, but only for a brief amount of time. His most famous triumph came when claiming the title for a 3rd time in the main event of WrestleMania 30, a celebration that must go down as one of the most jubilant moments in wrestling history. But wait, there were other reigns before that? That's right, Bryan is actually a 4-time WWE champion at the time of recording, but you'd be forgiven for not remembering his first 2 runs. The first lasted mere seconds when he kneed John Cena's head across the ring, but got screwed by Triple H and Randy Orton before it had even landed. That was at SummerSlam 2013, and the second came a short while after at Night of Champions. Once again, the Authority got involved, vacating the title because we're never allowed to be happy ever. Number 20, The Undertaker. Okay, so Taker's only just cracked the top 20, but before you hunt us down one by one and burn our houses, let us plead our case. Undertaker is one of the greatest of all time, of course he is, but his 4 reigns were not. Every time the dead man got a hold of the belt, it was always overshadowed by something else. Let's take a look. First, at Survivor Series 91, he beat Hogan by tombstoning him in the general direction of a steel chair, only to lose it 6 days later when Hogan threw ashes from the urn into his eyes. What a babyface. Taker's second reign began at WrestleMania 13, aka the WrestleMania where Bret and Austin should have been the title match. What have you done? His third came during the whole corporate ministry angle, which was a confusing time to say the least. Undertaker's final run was maybe the only time he was taken seriously as WWE Champion, and that came after beating an aging Hulk Hogan with the worst chokeslam ever. No prizes for guessing whose fault that was. We have no doubt that having Undertaker's name in its lineage adds a boatload of prestige to the WWE Championship, but taken individually, none of his reigns managed to fully deliver. It's a shame, but then again, he did win 21 times in a row at WrestleMania, so he's probably not crying about it. Number 19, Ric Flair. It's fair to say that the WWE Championship is not the belt most associated with Ric Flair, and 9-time NWA champion and 8-time WCW champion. Despite that, the Nature Boy did manage to claim the WWF title on 2 occasions, and created some magical moments in the process. He first seized the belt by winning the 1992 Royal Rumble, commonly regarded as the greatest Rumble of all time. He also enjoyed a classic title feud with Randy Savage, playing off the Macho Man's jealousy over Elizabeth and delivering some truly great heel promos in the process. So yes, despite being famous for holding lots of wrestling championships, Flair isn't particularly remembered for winning this belt. Still, he did some memorable things with it before passing it on to Bret Hart and jetting off into the sunset. Except the sunset wasn't a sunset, it was WCW in 1993. Don't look directly at it. Number 19, Shawn Michaels. Okay, look, we justified having Undertaker at number 20, so again, please put down the pitchfork and hear us out. Undertaker's WWE Championship reigns were always overshadowed by confusing storylines and screwy finishes. In contrast, HBK was always center of attention during his 3 stints with the belt. Unfortunately, something would inevitably happen to taint the title reign and sometimes even damage the belt's reputation. Shawn's first reign saw the boyhood dream come true at WrestleMania 12, but it quickly turned into the boyhood nightmare as HBK and his clique buddies landed in hot water over the infamous curtain call. If you don't know what that is, they stopped pretending that wrestling was real and people got very annoyed. 2 of those clique buddies then went to WCW and Shawn's title reign coincided with the unstoppable rise of the NWO. That probably didn't feel good. HBK's second reign ended when he lost his smile, vacating the title due to a knee injury. Or, as some people believe, vacating the title because he didn't want to lose to Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13. The third reign began with a little incident called the Montreal Screwjob, but it's not very important, you've probably never heard of it. In fairness, there were some excellent moments in the aftermath. Shawn was a compelling heel, a little toe rag who defended the belt in a fantastic casket match at the Royal Rumble. It was also the match that led to his first retirement, but not before dropping the title to Austin in the main event of WrestleMania, a real era-defining moment. It goes without saying that Michaels is obviously one of the best ever, but his brilliance extends far beyond what he did with the championship around his waist. Number 17, Bob Backlund. This is an interesting one. Backlund was one of those classic babyface champs who held the belt for many years in a row, almost 6 in fact. With legitimate amateur wrestling credentials, he enjoyed feuds with the likes of NWA champion Harley Race, Nick Bockwinkel, Jimmy Snuka, and the man he beat for the title, superstar Billy Graham. But remember in the intro to this video where I mentioned how Antonio Inoki unofficially won the title in Japan? Guess who lost it to him? That's right, Big Bobby Backlund himself. Backlund also has the dubious honor of being the first polarizing champion in the title's history, like some kind of early day John Cena or a prototype. Do you see what I did there? Yes, fans became quite sick of Backlund's chipper babyface act, and he was even voted the Observer's most overrated wrestler of 1983. Meltzer's been doing this for a while, hasn't he? How doesn't he get tired? We've already talked about how Backlund refused to lose to Hogan and instead dropped the title to the Iron Sheik, but he came back for a second bite of the cherry in 1994. At the age of 45, Backlund shockingly defeated Bret Hart after the Hitman's mum threw in the towel, which was far less pathetic than it sounds. Ironically, after making a transitional champion out of the Iron Sheik, Backlund became one himself, passing the belt from Bret to Diesel after a 3-day reign. Number 16, superstar Billy Graham. We know that the early days of the title featured long babyface reigns and transitional heel champions, but that's all changed thanks to Billy Graham. Like Kevin Bacon in Footloose, Graham rebelled against the system, but instead of doing it through dance, he became the first non-transitional heel champion. Yes, the biggest rebel I can think of is Kevin Bacon, leave me alone. Graham was a true innovator and would inspire a bucket load of future stars, including the likes of Hulk Hogan, Triple H, and Jesse Ventura. Arrogant and powerfully built, there was nobody better suited to being the title's first dominant heel champion. Alongside his manager, the Grand Wizard, Graham heeled his way to victory against a diverse range of opponents, including Dusty Rhodes, Mil Mascaras, Don Muraco, and Riki Choshu. Approaching a year with the title, he clashed with Vince McMahon Sr. over dropping the belt to Bob Backlund, instead pitching the idea of a babyface turn. Vince said no, and Graham was gone soon after. Number 15, Kurt Angle. It's difficult to critique Kurt's 4 reigns with the WWE title. Nothing particularly outrageous or controversial happened, they were just 4 solid, entertaining reigns from a consistently excellent wrestler. There's no doubt that Angle would have cracked our top 10 had he been booked to hold the belt for a while and really run with it. He still enjoyed enjoyed a collection of classic moments, from an emotional hometown victory over Steve Austin to one of the great WrestleMania main events. Fittingly, Kurt's final reign ended with a brilliant bout, often considered one of WWE's finest TV matches ever. He passed the title to Lesnar on SmackDown after a 60-minute Iron Man match, one that managed to be brutal and strategic in equal measure. Number 14, Edge. If your only memory of Edge with the title is the live sex celebration, that's a real shame. It's also completely understandable because he tried to celebrate winning the belt by having sex with Lita in the middle of the ring. It's not something you see every week on Raw, like a six-man tag match or Finn Balor losing. Edge didn't hold the WWE Championship for long, but he managed to win it 4 times and did some pretty inventive things along the way. He cashed in the first ever Money in the Bank contract and timed it perfectly right at the end of a grueling Elimination Chamber. He could also lose the belt in entertaining fashion, such as the excellent TLC match with Cena in his hometown of Toronto. Edge's last reign ended in very abrupt fashion, as Jeff Hardy quickly rolled him up in a chamber match in 2009. Still, the ultimate opportunist had the last laugh, crashing the event's other chamber, winning the big gold belt instead, and living to die another day. Number 13, Randy Savage. Due to a certain massive popular blonde man, the Golden Era saw many all-time legends never hold the WWF Championship. Piper, Steamboat, Roberts, and many more never got a taste of the gold, and that's very unfortunate. But can you imagine if the Macho Man had never been champion? It would have been an utter tragedy. Savage won the WrestleMania 4 tournament to scoop the vacant title, beating Butch Reed, Greg Valentine, One Man Gang, and Ted DiBiase along the way. Yes, Hogan tried to steal his moment afterwards, but it led to a classic Golden Era feud, the explosion of the Mega Powers. Savage lost to Hogan in the end, but he was able to enjoy a second reign in 1992, beating Ric Flair in a classic WrestleMania moment. The main event was a non-title match between Hogan and Sid, just to put things into perspective. That's on a card featuring Randy Savage versus Ric Flair. Number 12, AJ Styles. AJ Styles is one of the greatest champions in modern WWE history, but his time with the belt has occasionally featured a strange theme, and that theme is balls. AJ's initial run with the belt came after kicking Dean Ambrose in his lunar testicles at Backlash 2016. It was an amazing moment given AJ's status as Mr. TNA for so many years, and then Mr. New Japan for a few years after that. The reign wasn't bad either, although it contained a little too much James Ellsworth for our liking. It did end in fantastic fashion, however, a first-class epic with John Cena at the 2017 Rumble. Styles' second reign began and ended on SmackDown, but lasted for over a year. He beat Nakamura at WrestleMania 34 before being hit in the balls. He feuded with Shinsuke for a few months after that, and was hit a lot of time in the balls. Finally, after a wonderful match on SmackDown, he dropped the belt to Daniel Bryan after a massive kick in the balls. That said, I bet part of him wishes he was back at 5-star wrestling though. Number 11, CM Punk. CM Punk has this weird thing where people feel really strongly about him one way or another. He's a walking source of debate, but one of the least debatable things about him is the significance of his time as WWE Champion. Punk reintroduced the idea of an extended title reign, albeit one shrunk down to fit modern audiences. He was both face and heel during his 434-day stretch with the belt, but treated it like the most important thing in the world either way. In fact, Punk's heel turn happened because of the WWE Championship. He felt anger at being overshadowed by John Cena and Dwayne, despite holding the most coveted prize in wrestling. Sadly, the end of Punk's reign was probably the most frustrating, losing clean to The Rock, who hadn't been champion for a decade. Still, it could have been worse. He could have been jumped by Kevin Nash in jeans, which is exactly how his first reign ended. Crucially though, it began with a 5-star classic against John Cena. When it comes to Punk, you really have to take the good with the bad, but the former usually outweighs the latter. Number 10, Randy Orton. Randall Keith, Randall Keith, Randall Keith, Randall Keith, Randall Keith. Okay, let's calm down. This is serious. We're into the top 10 now. The Viper's a strange one, because if you look at his achievements and his natural talent, he's clearly one of the most successful superstars of all time. He's held the WWE title 9 times, the second most out of anyone, but it doesn't feel like we've been born witness to one of the greatest champions ever. Don't get me wrong, Randy's had some cool moments. He won, lost, and won the title all in the same night at No Mercy 2007. He unified the WWE and World Heavyweight Championships at TLC 2013, defeating Cena after handcuffing him to the bottom rope. One of Orton's best qualities is his versatility. He's always been there to fulfill a role in the title picture, whether it's cashing in on Daniel Bryan or being cashed in on by The Miz. He can retain the belt at Mania by booting Triple H in the head and pinning Cena. He can lose it to Bryan and make the whole world go ballistic. He can ignore insects if Bray Wyatt tries to distract him with insects. The list goes on. But despite all that, Orton has never generated as much of a buzz as fellow greats, whether that be in the form of heel heat, universal adoration, or a mixed reaction. Number 9, The Rock. Here's a shocking stat. Despite 8 title reigns, The Rock only held the WWE Championship for a combined total of 378 days. That averages out at around 47 days per reign, which isn't very long at all, especially when your nicknames include the People's Champion and the Great One. But despite never having a signature period atop the mountain, Rock was the champion at a time when wrestling was white hot, and if anyone had the charisma to stand out in the Attitude Era, it was him. His first reign began at Survivor Series 98 when he turned heel to become Vince McMahon's corporate champion. He then had that really violent feud that we talked about, the one with Mick Foley and all the chair shots. Things really picked up when a babyface Rock feuded with Triple H in 2000. Neither man could hold on to the title for very long, but every match was an enthralling one, backed up by some of the loudest crowds wrestling has ever produced. The following year, he met Austin in the main event of WrestleMania, a match considered one of the best in Mania history, and another incredible rivalry. Had Rock been given longer with the title and stayed away from CM Punk's reign in 2013, he would have easily cracked the top 5 here. Number 8, Pedro Morales. People talk about hot starts in WWE, guys like Styles and Angle who burst into the company, made an instant impression, and won their first world title a year or so later. It took Pedro Morales less than 3 months. The Puerto Rican babyface was an insanely popular champion in the early 70s, defeating Ivan Koloff at Madison Square Garden to kickstart his 3-year run. This win forced him to vacate the US title, which, yes, he'd also won in his first couple of months with the promotion. Morales feuded with challengers like Blackjack Mulligan, Freddie Blassie, and Blue Demon. His most famous defense came at Shea Stadium in 1972, where he and Bruno Sammartino had a groundbreaking face versus face match. It went to a 75-minute draw, with both men embracing after the bell. It became known as the match of the century. Pedro was eventually defeated by Stan Stasiak, a rather uneventful end to a historic reign. In a nice touch, however, he lost in the same manner as he'd won the title 3 years earlier. Both men's shoulders were down, Stasiak lifted his at the last second, and Morales' run was over. Number 7, Hulk Hogan. There are people out there who will claim that the Hulkster should be top 3 on this list, maybe even top overall. That's because they're focusing on the positives only. Our argument is this: as much good as Hogan did for the title, he would later tarnish it with politics and rampant egomania. He's still one of the most important figures in the history of the championship, but it certainly wasn't smooth sailing. Still, Hogan's first reign was incredible and did wonders not only for the title, but for the wrestling industry as a whole. His 1984 win over the Iron Sheik sparked Hulkamania and began the longest of his reigns, a 4-year stretch in the mold of Sammartino and Morales before him. He tagged with Mr. T, he slammed Andre, all was going well. The second reign was good too, defeating Savage at WrestleMania 5 before losing in legendary fashion to the Warrior a year later. From that point on, the issues mounted. The controversial feud with Slaughter, the outrageous ending of WrestleMania 9, the utter refusal to put anybody over. Let's also not forget that in 1993, Hogan took the title to New Japan for a feud with the Great Muta and publicly called it a toy. He likened the WWF Championship to a trinket on a Christmas tree. Try as we might, despite his historic importance, we couldn't place Hogan any higher on this list. A trinket. How disrespectful. Number 6, Brock Lesnar. A little earlier, we talked about how HBK's time with the belt seemed to bring out the worst of his career. Brock Lesnar's WWE Championship reigns are the opposite of that. Lesnar might not be everyone's cup of tea, but the four-time champ has been remarkably consistent with the gold. I know it's easy to think of Brock as an absentee champion, taking the Universal title and keeping it in his cave while he goes out and throws grizzly bears at other grizzly bears for sport, but with the WWE title, Lesnar's game has always been elevated. While WWE champion, Lesnar held up his end of classic feuds with Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, The Undertaker, and everyone's favorite, Bob Holly. He fought over the belt in 2 classic WrestleMania main events, and again, a quick reminder, this year's was the Universal title, the red one. We're talking about 19 and 31. Brock also specialized in winning the title in spectacular fashion, crushing The Rock, eviscerating Cena, and tussling with Kurt Angle in 2 brilliant bouts. When we first started researching this list, we didn't think Lesnar would make it this high, but it turns out, for all his flaws, he's been a bloody excellent WWE champion. Number 5, Triple H. It's all about the game and how you play it. It's all about winning the WWE Championship 9 times and making sure everybody knows you're the strongest and most amazing wrestler in the entire world ever. No offense, Shane. Triple H has beaten a lot of people in his WWE career. We all know that, and we've all gotten a little bit cross about it from time to time. However, everyone loves a final boss, and if there was ever a pro wrestling equivalent of a final boss, Triple H is it. Final bosses are great because they're tough, but when you beat them, it feels amazing. That's basically the story of Triple H and the title. The Rock was absolutely on fire at the turn of the century, but his big wins wouldn't have felt nearly as special if it weren't for the game standing in his way. Now, obviously, he hasn't been perfect. For every Jeff Hardy or Randy Orton elevated by Triple H, there's been a Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 18 or a Booker T at WrestleMania 19. That was actually for the big gold belt, but we sort of had to mention it, didn't we? Still, you only need to look at some of Triple H's earliest defenses to see why he takes the title very seriously. The encounters with Mick Foley at the Rumble and No Way Out 2000 are some of the most brutal in WWE history, and we also have to give credit to Foley. Not only did he give us 2 of Triple H's best matches, he also proved that the game was ready to become an all-time great. Number 4, John Cena. From the moment Cena beat JBL for the WWE title at WrestleMania 21, nothing would ever be the same again. The angry young rapper from West Newbury, Mass. would gradually evolve into a friendlier rapper, then again into just a friendly man, picking up championship after championship along the way. Cena is, unsurprisingly, the most polarizing champion on this list, but by this stage in his career, his greatness can hopefully be recognized. His 14 reigns may be excessive and may have robbed the momentum of others at times, but his star quality cannot be denied. Also, crucially, he hasn't just won the belt 14 times, he's dropped it to someone else 14 times as well. It's often easy to forget that. Actually, he's dropped it 13 times. He vacated the title in 2007, but he tore his pec, which does seem like a valid excuse. There's way too much to look at in great detail here, so let's just list a few highlights. Beating Triple H and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania, losing to RVD at One Night Stand, the TLC match with Edge in Toronto, the triple threat with DX in 2009, the 5-star classic with CM Punk, avenging his loss against The Rock, and finally defeating AJ Styles in a masterclass at the Royal Rumble. Oh, almost forgot one more. Feuding with Kevin Federline. Number 3, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Austin's greatness often speaks for itself, but we'll try to break down what made his time with the title so important. Stone Cold's 6 reigns are peppered with some of the most iconic wrestling moments of all time. Snatching the torch away from HBK, shaking hands with Vince over The Rock's prone body, and so on. He closed 3 WrestleManias by winning this championship, and also won it in the highest rated Raw segment of all time. Some people will tell you that the highest rated Raw segment was actually Mankind and The Rock doing This Is Your Life. Never trust those people because they listen to Vince Russo, and that's usually a bad idea. The most immediate thing we associate with Austin is the once-in-a-lifetime connection he had with the fans. Some of his best moments as champion certainly came as a result of this molten popularity, but we've also got a soft spot for his heel run. Business may have taken a nosedive when Austin turned, but the quality of his work remained very high. His feud with Kurt Angle was severely underrated, as were the comedic aspects of his heel persona. Like Hogan, Austin's reigns weren't perfect, but we've ranked him ahead of the Hulkster because he was always looking to enhance the belt, whereas in Hogan's case, it often felt like he was using the belt to enhance himself. Number 2, Bret Hart. Bret steered WWE through some of the choppiest waters in its history, and he did so while treating the top title as the most important prize in the industry. But it isn't just when he was a great champion that makes him such an impressive figure, it's why he was a great champion too. Hulk Hogan was a great champion because he was a huge cartoonish superhero. Steve Austin was a great champion because wrestling was crying out for an anti-hero, and he fit the bill perfectly. Bret Hart was a great champion because he was really good at wrestling and brought out the best of everybody he faced. Bret's first reign began in relatively underwhelming fashion, defeating Ric Flair at a Canadian house show in 1992. He dislocated one of his fingers during the match and popped it back in, an early sign of the toughness and determination that would characterize his time with the Gold. The Hitman seemed to win the title in spectacular ways, only to lose it in controversial fashion. He dropped it to Yokozuna, who immediately dropped it to Hogan, one of the biggest backward steps in WWE history. But Bret bounced back at WrestleMania 10, winning back the gold after pulling double duty. A 5-star cage match with Owen at SummerSlam followed, before Bob Backlund came along to help transfer the title to Diesel. Again, Bret won it back in, this time, a classic no DQ match at Survivor Series 95. He passed the torch to HBK, a favor that was never returned, and then of course the final of his 5 reigns came to an end in Montreal under the most controversial circumstances of all. It seems as though the Hitman was often a great champion in spite of the company, rather than enjoying the benefit of its full backing. He had to overcome so many obstacles and did so brilliantly. He almost topped our ranking, but there's still one more champion to mention. Number 1. Bruno Sammartino. We finally made it. We've reached number 1, the greatest WWE champion of all time, and in many ways, the man who made the title what it is today, Bruno Sammartino. Bruno held the belt longer than anybody else, recording over 4,000 days as champion. It's a record that will surely never be broken, but it isn't the only reason for his standing at the top of our list. When he beat Buddy Rogers in 48 seconds, Sammartino didn't just become the second ever champion, he became the first face of the promotion. He held the belt for over 7 years, transforming the industry in the process. He feuded with the likes of Killer Kowalski, Johnny Valentine, and Big Cat Ernie Ladd, selling out Madison Square Garden numerous times. He sustained the most heartbreaking loss in title history to Ivan Koloff, but bounced back a couple of years later to become the first 2-time champion. He beat Stan Stasiak to kick off another reign, one which included an intense feud with Stan Hansen. Hansen threatened to derail everything, accidentally injuring Sammartino at one stage. Bruno held on to the title and came back strong, defeating Hansen on the undercard of Muhammad Ali's infamous bout with Antonio Inoki. That was awarded PWI's Match of the Year for 1976. The Sammartino match, not Ali versus Inoki, let's not be silly. Eventually, injuries caught up with Bruno, and he asked Vince Sr. to let him drop the belt, feeling that he couldn't be the main man anymore. It was a true shame, but Sammartino relinquished the title to Billy Graham and stepped away from the spotlight, a true legend, and in our opinion, the greatest champion of all time. So that's our list, and we are bloody exhausted. We hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave your opinions in the comment section below. You can follow me on Twitter here. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.